My father made me believe that my mother had abandoned me, but he had kicked her out.
I woke up to the sound of my father's voice, loud, sharp, furious. Pack your things and get out now.
I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. The clock on my nightstand read 2:47 a.m. My room was dark, except for the thin sliver of moonlight cutting across the floor. I slipped out from under the covers, my bare feet hitting the cold wood, and padded toward the door. The shouting came from downstairs. My father's voice was so loud, I could almost feel the vibration through the floorboards. Then I heard her voice, my mother's, pleading, breaking. Please, John, we can talk about this in the morning.
No.
You think you can walk back in here and act like nothing happened?
Get out of my house. My stomach twisted.
I crept down 2 steps, enough to see into the hallway below. My father stood in the living room, his shoulders rigid, one hand gripping the front door as if ready to rip it off the hinges. My mother stood opposite him, her hair tangled, wearing the robe she always kept on the hook by the kitchen. A small duffel bag sat on the floor next to her. I hadn't heard anything about her leaving. She hadn't said goodbye.
Dad.
My voice was small, unsure.
Both of them turned.
My father's face softened instantly, my mother's eyes filled with tears. Go back to bed, Emily, my father said, his tone suddenly calm.
What's happening?
I asked, my voice trembling. Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart. He stepped toward me, blocking my view of her. Mom's she needs to go away for a while. Emily, my mother interrupted, her voice shaking.
I love you.
Remember that, no matter what. I reached for the railing, ready to come down, but my father's hand shot out.
Upstairs, now.
The force in his voice made me freeze. I went back up, my legs heavy, but at the top of the stairs, I lingered in the shadows. I heard the door open, the rush of cold air, and then it slammed shut.
Silence.
When I came down the next morning, my mother was gone. Her robe was still on the hook, her coffee mug half full on the counter. My father sat at the table, flipping through the newspaper as if nothing had happened. Where's Mom? I asked. He looked up with a sigh.
She left us, Emily. She's not coming back. The words felt like a punch.
What do you mean, she left? She doesn't want to be here anymore. Some people are selfish like that.
I shook my head. No, that's not true. I heard you.
You heard wrong, he interrupted sharply, then more softly. I'm sorry, but it's just you and me now.
We'll be fine.
I didn't cry that morning. I just sat there at the kitchen table, staring at my cereal while it turned soggy in the milk. My father moved around the kitchen as if nothing in the world had changed, humming to himself, tapping the side of the coffee pot. That day was the first time I noticed the silence in the house. It wasn't just the absence of her voice. It was something heavier, like the walls themselves had absorbed what happened last night and were holding it in. Over the next week, my father barely mentioned her. Whenever I brought up her name, he would say, "She made her choice, Emily. You need to accept it." When I asked for her phone number, he said she didn't leave one. When I asked if we could go to Grandma's to see if she was there, he'd tell me, "Your grandmother's siding with her, so we won't be visiting for a while." I was 12 then, old enough to notice how strange it all was, but too young to piece it together. I tried to keep asking, but every time, my father's answers got shorter, colder, sharper, until eventually I stopped. Life settled into a strange rhythm. He'd work during the day and come home late, sometimes smelling like beer. I learned to keep the house spotless because if I didn't, he'd snap. "Your mother never cared about this place, but I won't let it go to hell," he'd say. One night, a month after she left, I heard a noise outside my bedroom window. It was faint, like someone stepping on the gravel path that led to the back door.
I peeked through the blinds.
At first, I saw nothing, but then in the dim light from the porch, I saw a figure standing near the edge of the yard.
A woman. My heart jumped.
I opened the window just an inch.
"Mom," I whispered.
The figure froze, then took a step closer, and then I saw her face.
It was her.
"Emily," she whispered back.
I can't stay long.
"I just wanted to see you."
I pushed the window open wieder. WHY, don't you come inside.
Her eyes darted toward the house. "Your father wouldn't like that."
"He's not home," I lead.
But before she could answer, headlights swept across the yard. My father's truck pulled into the driveway.
Her eyes widened.
"I have to go."
"No, wait."
She shook her head, backing away, and within seconds, she was gone, swallowed by the darkness at the edge of the yard. My father came inside a moment later, tossing his keys on the counter. He glanced at me in the hallway, his eyes narrowing. What are you doing up? I thought I heard something. He stepped toward the back window, looking out.
Probably a raccoon.
Go to bed. I did as he said, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I knew now she hadn't left because she didn't love me.
She'd been here.
She wanted to see me, and my father was keeping us apart. From that night on, I started watching for her. Every creak outside, every shadow moving across the lawn, I hoped it was her. 2 months later, I found the first piece of proof. It happened on a rainy Saturday. My father was at work, and I was cleaning the hallway closet. I pulled out an old shoebox from the back, one I'd never seen before. Inside were papers, bills, old letters, photographs. Most of it seemed random, but near the bottom, I found a folded envelope with my name written in my mother's handwriting.
I froze.
My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a short letter. Emily, I wanted to come see you, but your father won't let me. He says I have no right to be here. I'm fighting to change that. I love you more than anything. Please don't believe anything he says about me.
I will come back for you. Mom.
The paper smelled faintly like her perfume, vanilla and lavender. I pressed it to my face, trying not to cry, but the tears came anyway. I was halfway through reading it again when I heard the sound of the front door unlocking. I stuffed the letter back into the envelope and shoved it under my shirt just as my father stepped inside. What are you doing? He asked, glancing at the mess of shoes and coats on the floor. Cleaning, I said quickly. He grunted, hanging up his jacket. Make sure you put everything back the way it was. That night, I hid the letter inside my pillowcase. It was my secret now, a tiny shred of truth in a house full of lies. Over the next few months, the tension between us grew. Every time I mentioned her, even indirectly, his jaw would tighten. One evening while we were eating dinner, I asked, if Mom left us, why did she come to the yard that night? He froze, fork halfway to his mouth. What are you talking about?
I saw her. She talked to me. Hayes eyes darkened. You re imagining things. No, I'm not. Cher, Enoch.
He slammed his fork down so hard the plate rattled.
Cher abandoned you, Emily.
She didn't want you. If you can't accept that, you'll make both our lives harder. I didn't answer, but inside I knew he was lying. By the time I turned 13, I had developed a quiet defiance. I started writing letters to my mother, even though I didn't have an address. I kept them hidden, hoping someday I could give them to her. Then one night in early spring, I saw her again.
It was just after midnight.
I was lying awake when I heard a faint tapping on my window. My heart pounded as I crept over and lifted the blinds. She stood there, soaked from the rain, her hair plastered to her face.
I pushed the window open. Mom, I whispered. Shoo, she whispered back. I can't stay.
I needed to see you.
Come inside, I begged. She shook her head.
I'm not allowed.
Hey.
Why did you leave?
I blurted.
Her eyes filled with tears.
I didn't.
He made me go. Before I could say more, the hallway light flicked on. Heavy footsteps approached my room.
Cher stepped back into the shadows.
I love you, Emily, she whispered, then disappeared into the night. My father opened my door a moment later, his expression unreadable. Why are you awake? I couldn't sleep. He stared at me for a long moment, then left without a word, but I knew he'd heard something. The next morning, the window in my room had been screwed shut from the outside. After that night, my father's behavior changed in small but unmistakable ways. He started locking the doors earlier in the evening, checking the windows before bed. He insisted on driving me to and from school, even though I'd always walked. You're too young to be wandering around alone, he said. But it felt like a cage disguised as protection. At school, I tried to focus on my classes. But every time I saw other kids with their moms waiting in the pickup line, bringing them lunch, cheering at games, I felt a deep ache in my chest.
I told no one.
My father had made it clear in his own way that talking about my mother was dangerous. One afternoon, I came home to find him in the living room with a cardboard box full of my mother's belongings. Her sweaters, her scarves, the photo albums. He was tossing them in without looking, his face blank. What are you doing?
I asked.
Cleaning out the junk she left behind.
That's not junk. It's hers.
She doesn't want it, and neither should you.
I stepped closer, my voice trembling.
Can I at least keep the photo albums? He paused, looking at me like I'd just said something ridiculous. No, we're not keeping reminders of someone who walked out on us. Before I could protest, he carried the box outside. I followed him into the backyard where a metal trash barrel stood waiting. Without hesitation, he dumped everything inside and struck a match. The flames caught quickly, curling the edges of photographs, turning smiles and faces into ash. I stood there, the heat hitting my face, feeling like I was watching parts of myself burn away. That night, I took the letter from my pillowcase and read it over and over until I fell asleep.
Months passed.
My father's grip on my life tightened. He went through my room when I was at school, just to tidy up, he said. My phone calls with friends were cut short, sometimes with him picking up the other line to listen. I began hiding my diary in the attic behind a loose panel, terrified he'd find it. Then, on my 14th birthday, the impossible happened. I was sitting in the kitchen, a small cake on the table, just me and him. There was a knock at the door. My father got up, muttering, "Probably the mailman." But when he opened the door, my breath caught.
It was her.
She looked older, tired, but her eyes lit up when she saw me.
Happy birthday, Emily. Shessa eat softly.
My father stepped in front of me. "You need to leave." "She's my daughter," my mother said, her voice shaking. "And she's my responsibility now," he snapped.
You lost your rikts wen you valket away.
"I never walked away, Emily," she interrupted, turning to me with a forced smile.
Go to your room. I didn't move.
My legs felt rooted to the floor. "Go," he said again, this time sharper. My mother's eyes pleaded with me.
I love you. Please remember that.
I wanted to run to her, to hug her, but my father's voice cracked through the air like a whip.
Now.
I went upstairs, but halfway up, I stopped and listened. Their voices were muffled, rising and falling, until finally the door slammed.
When I came down, she was gone.
My father sat at the table, calmly cutting himself a slice of cake, as if nothing had happened. "You let her in?" I asked quietly.
She came to cause trouble. It's over. But it wasn't over. Not for me.
After that birthday, I stopped pretending I believed him. I still played the quiet, obedient daughter, but inside I was watching, listening, collecting every scrap of truth I could find. A week later, I overheard him on the phone in his study. He didn't know I was standing just outside the door. "You show up here again, and I'll call the police."
She's mean now. Do you understand?
"You lost that chance when you left."
A pause, then colder. I don't care what story you're telling yourself.
"You're not getting near her."
The line went dead.
I backed away before he could see me, my heart pounding. That night, I wrote everything I'd heard in my diary. I didn't know what I'd do with it, but I wanted to record something real, something he couldn't erase. Over the next months, I noticed more cracks in his version of events. A bank statement left on the counter with a large withdrawal the day before she left. A neighbor mentioning they'd seen my mom carrying boxes to her car while my father stood on the porch, shouting. The way he flinched every time I mentioned her name. By the time I was 15, my determination had hardened into something sharp.
I started saving bus money in secret.
I didn't even know where she lived, but I was ready to find her. The opportunity came in the form of a substitute teacher. Miss Harper was young, kind, and paid attention in a way most adults didn't. One afternoon after class, she asked, "Is everything okay at home, Emily?"
So meeting in ME kriegt.
I didn't tell her everything, but I told her enough for her to lean in and whisper, "If you ever need help, you can come to me."
2 weeks later, I took her up on it.
It was a rainy Tuesday. My father was working late, and I'd found another letter from my mom hidden in an old book, dated just a month earlier. In it, she wrote, "I'm in the same town. I've never been far. If you want to see me, go to the diner on 8th Street, Saturdays at noon. I'm there every week."
My Hans schuke sie stuft the letter in my backpack.
The next Saturday, I told my father I was going to a friend's to study. I walked to the bus stop, my savings in my pocket, and rode across town. When I walked into the diner, I saw her instantly. She was in a booth by the window, stirring her coffee, her eyes scanning the street like she was waiting for something, waiting for me. I stood there for a second, frozen, before she looked up. Her face broke into a smile so full of relief it hurt to see.
Emily, shebriest, standing.
I went to her, and we hugged so tightly I thought neither of us would ever let go. We talked for hours. She told me everything. How my father had accused her of things she hadn't done. How he'd threatened to make sure she never saw me again if she didn't leave that night. How she'd tried over and over to fight for custody, but he'd twisted everything in court. I told her about the letters I'd found, the times I'd seen her in the yard. We cried, and for the first time in years, I felt something like hope. But when I got home, My father was waiting. The living room was dark except for the lamp in the corner. He sat in his chair, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. The moment I stepped inside, he looked up. "Where were you?"
His voice was calm, too calm.
At Rachel's, I said, forcing my tone to stay steady. He leaned back, studying me. "Rachel called about an hour ago, looking for you." The air felt like it thickened around me. My mouth went dry.
My beskjed forgått. Don't lie to me, Emily.
His voice was still soft, but there was a sharp edge underneath.
You were with her, weren't you?
I froze. My mind scrambled for a way out, but my silence was enough.
His jaw tightened. You think he don't know?
She's been sniffing around again. He stood, slow and deliberate. "After everything she did to us, you run to her like nothing happened." "She didn't do anything," I said, my voice trembling but louder now. "She told me you made her leave." His eyes narrowed. "She's filling your head with lies. She wrote me letters." The words came out before I could stop them. Something flickered in his expression, anger but also fear. "Where are they?"
I'm not telling you.
For the first time in my life, I saw him truly lose control. He crossed the room in 2 strides, his hand clamping down on my arm, not enough to hurt yet, but enough to make me understand I couldn't just walk away. "You don't keep secrets from me," he said, his voice low and cold. "Everything I've done has been to protect you from her. If you can't see that, then maybe you're not ready to make your own choices." I yanked my arm back.
Protect me? You ve been keeping me prisoner.
His nostrils flared. For a moment, I thought he might hit me. Instead, he stepped back, breathing hard.
Go to your room, he said finally.
"We'll talk when you've calmed down." But I didn't go to my room. Not right away. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, my heart hammering, knowing now there was no way I could keep living like this. That night, I moved the letters in my diary to Miss Harper's classroom, slipping in after school and hiding them in a box under her desk. It was the first step in what I knew had to come next. The next week, I found a way to slip another note to my mother. I wrote it during lunch, folded it into the smallest square possible, and gave it to a waitress at the diner when I passed by on my walk home from school.
It said, he knows. I'm not safe here. Please help me.
2 days later, a response came. It was tucked into my locker between my history and math books, just my name on the front, no handwriting I recognized. Inside was a single line: "Meet me at the park near the library on Friday, 4 p.m. The rest of the week dragged like time itself was punishing me. My father was more watchful than usual. Twice I caught him standing outside my room at night, as if listening. He began picking me up from school earlier than normal, citing safety concerns. By Friday, I had my plan memorized. I'd tell him I had to stay late for a group project. I'd leave school through the side entrance, cut through the alleys, and make it to the park before he realized I was gone. When I saw her sitting on the bench under the oak tree, I felt my chest loosen for the first time in years. She looked around nervously before I sat down beside her.
You got my note? I asked. She nodded.
"I've been talking to a lawyer. If you're ready, we can go to court again, but you'll need to tell them everything." "I will," I said without hesitation. "I don't care what he does after."
Just kan stay tere animore.
She reached for my hand, squeezing it tight. "We'll do this together, but we have to be careful." We talked for nearly an hour, planning the steps, deciding what evidence to show. I told her about the letters, the screwed-shut windows, the way he'd burned her photos. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes burned with anger. Then, as if the air shifted, she froze. "Emily," she whispered. "Don't look, but I think he's here." My blood turned cold. I turned just enough to see him standing across the street, half hidden behind a tree, watching us. My mother stood abruptly, pulling me with her. "We're leaving." But before we could take 2 steps, he was there, blocking our path. His voice was quiet, almost eerily calm.
You lead to ME again.
"She's coming with me," my mother said, her grip tightening on my hand. His eyes flicked to her, then back to me. "Is that what you want?" I swallowed hard, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear myself speak.
Yes.
Something in his face broke then, not sadness, not anger, but a cold finality. "You'll regret this." And just like that, he turned and walked away. I should have felt relieved, but instead, a heavy dread settled over me. I knew him too well. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of whatever he had planned next.
That night, he didn't come home.
It wasn't unusual for him to work late, but by midnight, The silence felt different, thicker, heavier. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the way he'd looked at me in the park. Those last words echoed in my head, "You'll regret this." When I came downstairs in the morning, the kitchen table was covered in papers, court documents, letters, old photographs. My stomach dropped when I saw my own diary lying open in the center, its pages fanned out like evidence.
He'd found it.
I stepped closer, scanning the pages. Whole sections were highlighted in yellow, every entry where I'd written about him, about my mother, about the night she was forced out. Next to some, he'd scribbled in pen, "Lies."
The front door opened. Ich spoon rund.
He stepped inside, holding a small cardboard box. "I stopped by the school," he said casually, setting the box down. "Picked up some things you've been hiding from me." The blood drained from my face. "You do know what happens when people make false accusations, Emily?" His tone was calm, conversational, but his eyes were sharp. "They lose, and then they pay for it."
I took a step back. None of it is false.
He smiled without warmth.
Dus and matter what's true. It matters what people believe.
"And I've been telling this story for years. You think anyone's going to believe you now?"
I didn't answer.
My hands were trembling. He leaned on the table, lowering his voice. "You have one chance to stop this.
No more seeing her. No more letters.
You stay here, you follow my rules, and we forget this happened." "And if I don't?"
I asked.
His smile widened, slow and cruel. "Then I'll make sure she disappears for good this time, and you'll never find her again." The threat sat in the air between us like poison.
I knew he meant it. That night, I didn't sleep.
I lay awake, thinking of every possible way to get out without him knowing. By morning, I had a plan, but it would take help and perfect timing. I went to Miss Harper that afternoon, slipping her a note that read, "He's threatening her. I need to leave soon, please." She read it in silence, then nodded once.
Saturday. Il drive you.
For the first time in years, I felt something like hope again. Saturday came like a held breath finally breaking. I kept my movements slow that morning, deliberate, so he wouldn't suspect anything.
Vi ate breakfast in silence.
He sat across from me, reading the paper, but every so often, his eyes flicked up, watching me in that way that made my skin crawl. At 10:30, I told him I was going to the library to work on a project. He didn't even look up from the paper when he said, "Be back by lunch."
I walk down the street, my backpack slung over my shoulder, heart pounding. At the corner, I saw Miss Harper's car waiting.
I climbed in quickly, and she pulled away without a word. We didn't speak until we were halfway across town. "Your mom's at the diner," she said. "From there, we'll drive straight to my sister's place. You can stay with her until the court date." But as we turned onto 8th Street, my chest tightened. His truck was parked 2 spaces from the diner entrance.
Miss Harper's wore under Herbrit.
"He must have followed you before." I spotted him through the diner window. He was sitting in a booth across from my mother, leaning in close, his face hard. My mother's hands were gripping the edge of the table. "Keep driving," I said quickly. "No," she replied, jaw set. "We're ending this today." She pulled into a space, and before I could stop her, she was out of the car. I followed, my legs shaky.
The bell up of the diner door jingled as we stepped inside.
His eyes landed on me instantly. "Emily," he said, voice low but sharp.
Outside. Now.
"She's staying," my mother said firmly. The room seemed to hold its breath. He stood slowly, towering over both of us. "You think you can take her from me after everything I've done for her?" "You've kept her prisoner," Miss Harper said, stepping forward. "That ends today." His gaze slid to her, icy. "This isn't your business." "It is if she asked me for help," she shot back.
The tension snapped all at once.
He reached for my arm, but I jerked back. "No," I said, my voice shaking but loud.
I'm not going with you.
Something dark flickered in his expression. For a second, I thought he might grab me anyway, but instead he smiled, a thin, dangerous curve of his mouth.
"Fine," he said quietly.
"But you'll see. She'll leave you again, just like before. And when she does, don't come crawling back." He brushed past us and walked out.
The sound of the bell over the door felt like the end of the meeting, but not the end of my fear. Because I knew him, he wouldn't stop.
Not until he'd taken something from me that I couldn't get back. I could barely process what I was hearing. My father's voice was calm, too calm, as if he had rehearsed this conversation 100 times in his head. "You don't understand," he said slowly. "I did what I had to do. Your mother, she was a danger to us, to you.
A danger. I whispered, my throat tight. How?
He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then said, she was talking about leaving with you, taking you away from here. She wanted to keep you from me forever. I couldn't let that happen. That's not the same as being a danger, I snapped. That's wanting custody. That's.
My voice broke. Tats Notabandonung me. His jaw clenched. It's Vase.
She wanted to poison you against me. She told me herself. She was going to tell you lies, twist your mind, make you hate me. I stared at him, searching his face for the man I thought I knew. All I could see now was a stranger who had decided unilaterally that I didn't deserve a choice. You took that choice away from me, I said, my voice shaking. You threw her out and told me she didn't want me.
You lied for 15 years.
I protected you, he insisted. You were too young to understand the kind of person she was.
I shook my head.
No, I was too young to defend her. You made sure of that. His eyes hardened, a flash of something sharp and defensive crossing his face. If you're so sure I'm the villain here, maybe you should go find her. See what kind of person she really is. The challenge in his tone made my skin crawl.
Maybe I will, I said. And for the first time, I meant it.
I froze, my fingers tightening around the mug I hadn't realized I was still holding. The ceramic burned my palm, but the heat barely registered. Get out, my father said again, his voice low now, almost calm, the calm that always came before his worst storms. You don't get to tell me what to do in my house, my mother said, but her voice was trembling. I could hear it. She sounded smaller than I had ever heard her sound before. This isn't your house anymore, he said, and I heard the thud of something heavy hitting the floor, her suitcase.
My Brit kaukt.
I wanted to run down the stairs, to stand between them, to demand an explanation, but my legs refused to move. You're not serious, she said, her voice breaking. You think I'm going to let you poison her against me?
Not a chance.
I didn't understand what he meant then.
Not fully, but I would. God, I would.
He opened the front door. The cold air rushed in, carrying the sound of cars passing somewhere far away.
Go, he said. I'm not leaving here. My mother's voice rose suddenly, fierce trug the tears. I am not abandoning my Daukata.
You already have, he cut her off, his tone cruel. You've been gone in every way that matters for years. A sharp slap of silence followed. I realized my heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Then came the sound of her footsteps, slow, reluctant, heavy, moving toward the door. I'll come back for her, she said, her voice shaking but determined.
No, he said flatly. You won't. The door slammed.
I sat there, unable to move, staring at the wall. My father's footsteps came up the stairs, steady and unhurried. When he appeared in my doorway, his face was strangely calm, as if nothing had happened. Your mother decided she can't do this anymore, he said evenly.
She's gone.
I stared at him, my throat tight.
Gone. He nodded.
She didn't want to be here. She's not the person you thought she was. The silence between us stretched so thin, I thought it would snap. I felt his gaze on me, heavy, as if he were measuring my worth in that moment. You think you can survive without me, he said finally, his voice low but laced with a venom that made my skin prickle.
I swallowed.
I've been surviving without the truth for years. I think I can handle anything now.
He laughed, a short, bitter sound.
You're more like her than I thought. It was meant as an insult, but I took it as a strange kind of compliment. The next few days felt like walking a tightrope. My father didn't speak to me unless it was to give short, clipped instructions. He still controlled the finances, the car, even the food. He had always kept the power, but now I saw it clearly. And every time I caught his eyes on me, I felt that familiar wave of dread, the one that had been with me since childhood, but I had never understood until now. One evening, I found myself staring at the old family photo again, the one with all three of us, taken when I was 5. My mother's smile looked genuine, radiant even. My father's arm was around her, but his grip seemed tight, almost possessive. And me, I was grinning, oblivious to the storm that must have been brewing. I traced my mother's face with my finger and whispered, I'm going to find you. It became my quiet mission. I waited until my father left for one of his late-night business meetings. Then I slipped into his office and searched. The desk drawers were locked, but I found the spare key taped under the desk. Inside, there were envelopes, receipts, and a stack of letters. My hand shook as I opened one. It was from my mother. The postmark was from 3 years after she disappeared. Her handwriting was messy, like she'd been in a hurry or in distress. "I've been trying to contact you.
I sent gifts, letters.
Why haven't you answered?"
Please, just tell MA if she's okay.
There were more letters, each one more desperate than the last. Some had never been opened. I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from making a sound. She hadn't abandoned me. She had been searching for me all along. The anger that bloomed in my chest was unlike anything I'd ever felt. I stuffed as many letters as I could into my backpack, then quietly locked the drawers again. When my father came home, I pretended to be asleep, but my mind was racing, planning my next move. I was done being his prisoner. The weeks after that dinner felt like I was walking on a wire suspended over a pit. Dad avoided me most of the time, but when we crossed paths, his eyes burned with something between contempt and defiance. I stopped trying to talk to him about Mom. Every attempt only pushed him further into anger, and I needed my strength for what I was planning. I'd saved enough money from my part-time job at the bookstore to buy a bus ticket to the city where I thought Mom might be. The envelope she left didn't have a return address, but I recognized the name of the cafe she'd mentioned in one of her letters years ago. I still meet friends sometimes at the cafe near the old clock tower. That clock tower was in Greenville, 3 hours away. One rainy Saturday, while Dad was out on a supply run, I packed a small bag, slipped the folded letter inside, and left. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would give me away to the bus driver. Every mile felt like shedding a layer of lies that had been pressed onto my skin since I was 10. Greenville was quieter than I'd imagined. The rain had tapered to a drizzle, and the streets smelled of wet asphalt and bread from a nearby bakery. I found the cafe easily. It hadn't changed much since the faded photo I'd seen online. Inside, it was warm, the air filled with the scent of coffee and cinnamon.
I stod in the doorway, scanning faces. Most wäre strangers. Until my Gase kaukt a woman in the corner.
Her hair was streaked with more gray than I remembered. Her hands were cupped around a mug. She looked up, and for a second, I thought I was seeing a stranger who only happened to have my eyes. Then her expression shifted. Shock, disbelief, a tremor of hope, and I knew.
Lena, she whispered. I nodded.
My throat was too tight for words. She rose slowly, as if afraid I'd vanish if she moved too fast. When she reached me, her hands hovered over my shoulders before finally resting there, tentative but warm.
I tugt. She began, then stopped, swallowing. I thought you left, I said. My voice cracked on the last word. Her face crumpled. No, Gott, no.
He told you that, didn't he?
I nodded again.
He said you didn't want me. She shook her head so violently her hair brushed her cheeks.
I fought to stay. I fought so hard.
Her voice broke, and she looked around, lowering it.
He made sure I couldn't.
He had people watch me.
He changed the locks.
He threatened to ruin me if I tried to take you. My stomach turned cold. Why didn't you tell me?
I tried.
I sent letters, gifts, but everything came back.
Orvose, ID Herr Noting et al.
I didn't know if you were okay or if you even got my messages.
She grippet my hands.
Did you? I thought of the unopened packages I'd seen once in the garage, hidden under tarps, of Dad tossing envelopes into the fire without reading them.
My chest ached. No, I said.
He kept everything from me. Her eyes filled, but she blinked the tears away. We can fix this now.
Jure here. We can start over.
But even as I let her pull me into a seat and order us tea, a shadow loomed over us, not in the cafe, but in my mind. Dad. He wouldn't just let me go.
And I was right.
That night, after Mom insisted I stay in her small apartment, we heard it. 3 heavy knocks on the door.
My blod frotze.
Mom looked at me, then at the door.
Don't move, she whispered. The knocks came again, sharper this time.
A voice followed, low, steady, and unmistakable.
Lena, open the door.
We need to talk. I stood frozen in the doorway as my father's expression collapsed into something I had never seen before. His face drained of color, and for the first time in my life, he looked afraid. Anna, he said softly, almost pleading.
You don't understand.
I understand perfectly, I interrupted, my voice trembling but firm.
You threw her out. You lied to ME for years. You made ME hatte her. My moters hand slipped into mine, warm and steady.
You don't have to stay here, she whispered. But I wasn't ready to walk away just yet. I had questions that had eaten me alive for more than a decade.
Why?
I asked him. The word came out as more of a demand than a plea. He took a step toward me, then stopped when my mother's grip on my hand tightened. I thought I was protecting you, he muttered, staring at the floor. She was going to leave. That's a lie, my mother cut in sharply. I begged you to let me stay.
You knee I had novere to go. He shook his head. You don't know what it was like, Anna. She was. Enough, I said.
My voice was cold now, almost unrecognizable to myself. I spent my whole childhood thinking I wasn't worth staying for. Every time I cried on my birthday, every time I wondered why she didn't call, it was because of you. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, or just the fear of losing control.
I didn't care anymore. I stepped back towards the door. I'm done living in your version of the truth.
He reached out as if to stop me, but I moved out of reach. My mother and I left together, and the air outside felt sharper, cleaner. We didn't speak for a long time. As we walked down the street, she finally asked, "Are you sure you're ready for this? Leaving him behind?" I looked at her, the woman I had spent years resenting, and realized that this, walking away, wasn't losing something. It was finally getting something back.
I'm ready, I said.
And for the first time in years, I actually believed it.